Greetings everyone and welcome to a tutorial on crossbows from Tinker's Construct. I'm Jack Draco, and even though there's lots of tutorials and guides out there regarding Tinker's Construct, there's not a lot of information about crossbows. Now they are pretty new, so this is understandable, but today we're going to be talking in great detail about how to make them awesome, and what makes them different from just a regular old bow. You may be wondering, I have a pretty sweet bow. Why do I need a crossbow, Jack Draco? Well, I'm glad you asked. So first of all, let's go over here and grab a crossbow. I made a manual crossbow earlier. Actually, I just pulled it out of NEI. Crossbows require that you have ammunition in the form of bolts. You cannot use regular arrows with this. They won't work. Similar to bow and arrow, you're going to load the bolts into the crossbow, but different than a bow and arrow, the loading timer is after the shot. As you can see, I shoot and my reticle starts closing. That's how I know I'm reloading. It's automatically loading for me. I'm not holding a button. I'm not pressing a button. It's automatic. So with a traditional bow or longbow or short bow from Tinker's, you have to hold the right click button to load the arrow, and while you do so, you're kind of slow, which can get you into trouble. Not so with the crossbow. You shoot, bang, do about 7.5 hearts of damage right there, and then it automatically reloads for you. While it's reloading, you can do whatever you want. Run around, jump, yippee-ki-yay, whatever you need to do, and then boom, you're ready to go. The other good part about this is that it stays loaded even when you toggle over to other items on your toolbar. So you can be out in the world, wandering about, and then all of a sudden you get surprised by a mob or a monster, and you quickly hop arrow to the bow, and it's ready to shoot from the hip right away. You don't have to hold and charge up the bow like you do with the bow. And for that reason, most people stack a lot of redstone on their Tinker's bows, so they have a very low draw speed, which is definitely understandable. I don't think that it's as important with a crossbow to put a lot of redstone on there, and I hope to prove that as we get more in depth with the modifiers that we're going to be putting on our crossbows a little bit later on. So as you can see here, I'm shooting at some test dummies. Now these test dummies were nice enough to volunteer for this task. Don't ask me why. They were lining up. It was crazy. So this first one you can see here, I measured it out to 10 blocks, and then they increment in 5. So we get a 15 blocks, 20 blocks, 25, 30, and this lonely guy down here is 35 blocks. So the reason I did that is because damage from these bolts can degrade over time. And by time, I actually mean distance. The farther away you're shooting, the less damage they do. So that can be a factor in how you design your crossbow. You can see here that if I shoot this dummy, doing about 7.5 damage, a little bit less. If we look at our crossbow, you can see that my attack value is 7.5 hearts. So that makes sense. But then why am I doing a little bit less? Well, the reason for that is what I just said. Your damage will decrease over distance. If we're at point blank here, bang, I'm doing the full 7.5. Back here, which again is a distance of 10, I'm doing about 0.08 less, which is actually about 10% rounded up of my weapon's base damage. 7.5 rounded up to 8, 10% is 0.08, I guess 1%. Anyway, if you can see here, I shoot at this one, which is 15 blocks. Alright, same. We haven't degraded any more. Next one in line is at 20 blocks. Okay, 7.35. We've lost another 10%, which is 0.07. Excuse me, another 1% recalculated based on our new attack damage. Then we get that guy way over there. Now he is past 20 blocks. He's at 25. You can see I'm doing drastically less damage. The degradation of the damage over distance is a factor in part of the weight of your bolts. Heavier bolts have a shorter max distance, however they retain their damage over great distances better than a light arrow. And we can prove that right now. So this is just a wooden bolt with an iron tip and regular feather fletchings. Let's take a look at a steel bolt with a, it's a steel bolt with an iron tip and feather fletchings. So let's just discharge the wood arrow that we still had loaded and take a gander at this thing. Alright, so we're doing the same damage here. 7.5, a little less. Same. No surprises so far. Oh, 10.75. Why did I do that much damage? Well, crossbows have a built-in crit mechanic. They have a chance to do what appears to be 50% increased damage. This is, in my opinion, to balance the fact that they can't get a full draw bonus like you can with a bow. If you pull back all the way on a bow and you hit something, you're doing 50% increased damage. Since crossbows have an automatic draw, you don't get that luxury, so there's just a chance, I think it's around 10%, to get a crit. Alright, so you can see 7.39, alright. Now remember, this is the one where, with the other arrows, which were much lighter, this is a weight 8.7 bolt. I shouldn't call them arrows, they are bolts. The other one was about 5, I believe. I'm still doing 6 damage, whereas the other one was only doing between 2 and 3. So even though my damage is still decreasing over distance, I am retaining my damage for a longer range because of the heavier weight of my bolts. So that's pretty cool. And we can test this further. I made some slimy bolts. These are made with a slime core, an iron tip, and feather fletchings. So identical to the other arrows, except the core is made out of slime instead of metal. And its weight is pretty light. It's 3.63. You can see the wooden ones we were shooting earlier were 4.34. And the steel ones we were just shooting, 8.7. So I'm going to discharge that last steel bolt. Alright. Now you can see again, at close ranges, our damage is going to be identical. It's the tips of the bolts that are going to really change your damage up. And we haven't been swapping that out. We've just been utilizing different core materials. 7.42, no surprises there. 7.35. Alright, so here's the greater than 20 blocks out. Ouch, that's pretty bad. Now that being said, the balance there is that these shoot farther than the heavier arrows do. So let's see just how much farther. So again, I'm going to shoot at this back wall, we'll say. I'm going to aim right at that. We're going to line up the top of my reticle with the top of that block there. Bang. Alright. Now let me get rid of these guys. So I've got the steel ones loaded up now. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to line up the top of my reticle. Bang. So let's go take a peek and see just how much it fell in its trajectory based on its weight. Okay, so it's about 1 block lower. About 1.5 blocks lower over a distance of 37 blocks. Not too bad in my opinion. I'll let you make your own decision based on your needs, but personally I think the heavier bolts are worth it because I don't think it's that big of a drop in total distance compared to how much damage it retains. So personally I'll be making my bolt cores with heavier materials. Alright, so that pretty much covers the mechanics of the crossbow. As you've probably seen by now, you do need to have bolts on your person. They don't necessarily need to be in your hotbar. You can see I'm still reloading even though they're not in my hotbar. I'm using iron bolts. And you can see in the crossbow if you hold shift, or even if you don't hold shift, that I'm loaded up with iron bolts currently. So if I had multiple bolts here, it's going to default to the last arrow it shot, the last bolt that it shot. However, if I have one on my hotbar, it will prioritize that one. I've still got 1 iron bolt in the chamber here, so I'm going to discharge that. And now you can see that I've loaded up. Oh, right. These are called iron bolts because it's named after the tip, the material. That's a little confusing. But you can see I'm loaded up with the slime ones. They're the blue color. So, all right. Let's put away these arrows for now, these bolts, and the crossbow. So crossbows are sweet. They reload after you shoot. You can leave them loaded. In theory, you could have a whole hotbar full of crossbows that were already loaded if you were crazy like that. And then you could just quick swap between them and fire off like a machine gun. I think that's pretty cool. Also, they reload automatically. You don't have to hold or press a button, and you can move freely while they are reloading. So for a lot of reasons, I really like crossbows. So how do you make one? Well, I'm glad you asked that. Let's go over here to the tool forge. We're going to go to crossbow. We can see that it takes 4 components. There's a tough binding here, a crossbow limb, a crossbow body, and a bowstring. So I've got some materials that I set aside over here in this chest. Just a few options for limbs, some for the bodies, the tough bindings. There is only one option for bowstrings, unless you are using a mod that adds additional ones. I believe Natura adds the fiery bowstring, and I believe that Thaumcraft adds an enchanted fabric bowstring as well. So let's go ahead and grab these here. And we're going to look at some of the differences in materials and how they're going to affect the overall weapon. Alright, so let's just say I wanted to make this whole thing out of paper. Let's say I want a lot of modifiers here. You can see that I'm going to have a total of 6 modifiers because I'm using 3 pieces of paper. What's that tell us? It's that crossbows start with 3 modifiers, which is pretty standard for Tinker's Construct. Now, you can see that this is a pretty poor crossbow. It only has 9 durability, it only does half a heart of damage, it has a very fast draw speed, 0.9 seconds is less than a second draw speed, but the arrow speed is also kind of poor. So what can we do to make this a little bit better? Well, let's take a look at this Manual Tough Binding. Manual is a pretty high-end resource in Tinker's Construct, as you know, so if we swap out the binding, we should see some improvement over here, right? Huh. Nothing. We lost a modifier. And that's about it. So yeah, the tough binding only gives you any special properties of the material. It doesn't actually have an impact on any of the stats of the crossbow itself. So I will probably be going with paper tough bindings for most of my crossbows. But if you really want to get something on here like jagged, although that might not work exactly the way you think it does, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you had a material that had a specific property that you wanted on your bow, then yeah, the tough binding is a great place to put that because it won't affect the actual attributes of the bow. Alright, so I guess we're going to leave that as paper. But what about the crossbow body? Now if you see, under the crossbow item here, it says that there's a special ability, reduced reload time with harder materials. Now this is a little vague. What is a harder material? There's no actual hardness attribute for materials. And I will also add to that that I have seen no difference based on materials of a reduced reload time. I'll show you what I mean. So with a paper body, you can see that we've got 9 durability, half a heart, 0.9 draw speed, 1.65 arrow speed. If we swap that out with a Manual body, which is a high-end material, what's changing? Boom. Well, our durability skyrockets, as we can tell. That's no surprise. We lose a modifier because we're losing the paper. But our attack's not changing, our draw speed isn't changing, even though this is clearly a very hard material, especially compared to paper, and our arrow speed's not changing. Okay, well, we'll leave it as Manual because having more durability is nice. I don't want this thing to break all the time. It certainly isn't getting the full 1200 durability that the crossbow body leads me to believe it will have, but fine, we'll ignore that for now. And also, it shows here that there's a draw speed and an arrow speed on the body, and yet the body doesn't seem to have any impact on the draw speed or the arrow speed of the final crossbow. And we can test that with the third item here by swapping it out with this blue slime crossbow body. Again, you can see that we're affecting the durability only. You will also get any special abilities from the material, such as slimy, if you're into that sort of thing. So yeah, bodies only affect durability, and they only affect the material abilities that you get from like slime or paper. Don't be led astray by the draw speed and the arrow speed under the tooltip here. That doesn't actually do anything. But I like the durability, so I'm going to keep this as manual in here. So now we get into the big one, the paper crossbow limb. This is where most of the action is happening with the crossbow. You can see that right now we've got half a heart of attack, 0.9 second draw speed, and 1.65 arrow speed. If we swap that out with a manual and crossbow limb, boom. So first thing, our durability goes through the ceiling here. We got 3,000 durability. Our attack has jumped up from 0.5 hearts to 2 hearts, but our draw speed has also significantly increased. It was 0.9 before, it is now 4.65. Which is also interesting, right? Because it says 2.5 second draw speed here on the component itself. How is it getting to 4.65? And similarly, when we had it as a paper crossbar, it said that our draw speed was 0.5, and here it is over here at 0.9. Well, there is a multiplier that's inherent in the crossbow that will change the draw speed. It starts at 2.5, and then it multiplies it. It changes it. The bowstring can have an effect on that, but since this is the vanilla bowstring, it's not a factor right now. But just keep in mind that the draw speed you see on the limb isn't necessarily the draw speed you're going to see on your final product. But generally speaking, a lower draw speed on your limb is going to be a lower overall draw speed. A higher draw speed on your limb is going to be a higher overall draw speed. So it still makes sense. It's just I don't know the exact math. If anyone out there does, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I haven't actually looked at the code for this mod. Alright, so Manualin seems pretty sweet. We got 7.5 arrow speed, 2 hearts of damage. Our draw speed is 4.65. That's a very slow draw speed, but we can bump that up a little bit with some redstone if we want to. But like I said before, I don't think that draw speed is quite as important with a crossbow as it is with a longbow. So, the only thing left is the string, which we can't change right now. If we had a fiery bowstring or something else, we could throw it in there and maybe get a different draw speed multiplier, durability multiplier, or arrow speed multiplier. But for now, we cannot. We can also test here, excuse me, if we swap out the Manualin limb with the slime limb, we lose our damage again. Our durability is still up there because slime crossbows are the same durability as Manualin crossbow limbs. Our draw speed is significantly lower, but our arrow speed is also a little bit lower. So my observations are that the harder the material of your limb, the slower your draw speed is going to be, but the faster it's going to project your arrows. Which makes sense when you think about it. If you're using Manualin or steel or some other really hard material as your bow limbs, then it's going to take a lot more effort to pull those back, but it's also going to be applying a lot more force when you release the trigger of the crossbow. So this is how you make a crossbow, these 4 components. And I think this is a pretty good crossbow to start with. I encourage you to mess around with it and see what you can come up with. But this is definitely a decent place to start. So let's go ahead and grab that. I'm going to come over here and put away these components that we're not going to use anymore. So you may be looking at this stuff on the top right of this chest here. And here as well. These are what you need to make the bolts. Bolts are the ammunition for the crossbows. Now these are a little weird. They kind of use a different mechanic than you might expect. The way this works is you're going to need a tool rod. And you're going to lay it in your casting table. I'll demonstrate. Let's just get a wooden tool rod here. You can see, I'll mention it now, I have a Metallurgy 4 installed. The reason I have it installed is I wanted to demonstrate that it does not, in fact, work. It looks tempting. It looks like it might. If you search for crossbows, you can see you've got hepatizon, brass, angmalin, electrum, sanguinite, all kinds of these metals that Metallurgy 4 adds. But you'll also notice that these are almost all the same with the exception of their durability. It's because the components, such as the limbs and the bodies, don't exist for these other materials yet. You can also see that they're just a default whitish color. So those are not finished products. You can pull them out of NEI and they will work, but there's really no benefit to doing so at this point in time. I'm sure that that functionality will be added. As of right now, there are 19 materials that you can make stuff out of. Cobblestone, netherrack, wood, cactus, flint, paper, bone, bronze, copper, 2 different slime crystals, green and blue, ardite, cobalt, manulin, steel, alumite, obsidian, pig iron, and iron. So those are all available for use when making crossbows. Okay, so we've got our wooden tool rod here. Now, this is going to determine the actual core of the bolt. The shaft itself is going to be made out of wood. And in my smeltery here, you can see I've got some steel, I've got some copper. We're going to pour some steel over this, just like you're making a cast. But instead of making a cast, it'll take a second, it's going to give us a bolt core. The material you pour over it determines the tip. You can see that we now have a wood bolt core with a steel tip. I'm just going to right click that and pick it up. Alright, so now we've got a couple different stats here. We've got durability, break chance, and weight. We talked a little bit about weight already, so we're going to talk next about break chance. When you shoot a bolt, if you do not hit something and it lands in the ground, there is a chance that you can run over and pick it back up. So the break chance is going to affect how likely that is to occur. The higher your break chance, the less likely it is that you'll be able to recover your bolts. And the durability is going to affect probably not what you would expect. It's actually going to affect how many bolts exist in a stack of your ammunition. And I'll explain that a little bit more once we actually make a finished product here. So I've got a few bolts that I made up already. I'm going to snag these. And I also have some fletchings that I made. There are 5 fletching materials available in Tinker's Construct, again, unless you are using some other mod that adds additional ones. The regular fletching is what I'll call it, the regular fletching. It's feathers. It's pretty obvious. You can see that these have a durability modifier, their own break chance, and they affect the accuracy of the bolt. The accuracy being variance from the target. So the higher the accuracy, the less likely it is for your bolt to go astray. So high accuracy is good. Leaf fletchings made out of oak leaves or any type of leaf. You get stone bound, durability. The durability modifier on this one's quite nice. Has a 0% break chance, which is also quite nice. However, not very accurate. Slime fletchings, not so good on the durability, okay on the break chance, fairly accurate. Blue slime's identical, green and blue. So I guess choose whatever color you like best, or whichever slime you have access to. And lastly, the slime leaf fletching. This guy, I think, is probably the best choice. You get jagged, you get a durability modifier that's greater than 1.0. It has a relatively low break chance, and it's 94% accurate, which in my opinion is good enough. So we're going to grab these fletchings, and we're going to come over here to our tool forge. We're going to go to our bolts, and we're going to start mixing and matching and seeing what we come up with. So first things first, this is a wooden bolt with a steel tip. If we combine that with a regular feather fletching, we're going to get a stack of bolts that has 75 ammo. It does 2 hearts. It weighs 4.63, has a 97.5% accuracy chance, and a little bit under 8% for a break chance, with the base 2 modifiers remaining. And yes, you can make your bolts out of paper. As far as I know, there's no way to get liquid paper, so you can only make the bolt core, but that will give you that 1 extra modifier, so you'll have 3 to start. If you are using something like Thaumcraft, I suspect you could use Thaumium, maybe for both the bolt core and the tip, which may give you 4 modifiers to begin with. You'll have to play around with that. Alright, so the interesting thing about this, when it's in your inventory, it is not 75 steel bolts. It is 1 steel bolt with 75 uses. Now this is an important distinction to make, because the 75 is really a representation of the durability of this item. You can see here that the durability base of the wooden bolt is 97, and the feather fletching has a 1x modifier, so it's not changing it at all. So how do we get from 97 to 75? And the answer is, I don't really know. But similar to the other attributes we've talked about, it's all logical, right? If you have a higher durability bolt, you're going to have a higher stack of output here. So let's try swapping this out. Instead of a wooden bolt with a steel tip, how about an iron bolt with a steel tip? Boom. All right. So we've definitely got more durability. You can see here that our ammo amount went up in this stack. And by the way, when your ammo is depleted, you just have to bring the bolt back here to the tool forge and you repair it with whatever the repair material is. You can see here that it's steel. It's the same as the tip. Okay. So you would just place it in here with a steel ingot to repair it back up to its full capacity. Alright, so we're doing 98 ammo. We've got 2 hearts, much heavier bolts. So again, this is going to reduce its total distance that it can travel, but it's going to also reduce how quickly its damage degrades over long distances, past 20 blocks. You can also see that it's 97.5% accurate, which is the same accuracy as the wooden one. However, it has a higher chance to break, and that's just inherent in making a iron core. Alright, so we've seen what 2 bolts look like that are the same tip. But let's compare a wooden bolt with a steel tip to a wooden bolt with a copper tip. We can see here that the durability is going to be the same. So that is a product of the core itself and not of the tip. You can see that the break chance is the same and the weight's the same. So all the stats here appear to just be related to the bolt. But when we swap it out, we can see that there are definitely some changes. First of all, our ammo dropped way down. That's because copper is a much less durable material than steel. So the bolt tip has a big impact on your overall ammo size. You can also see that our attack has dropped from 2 hearts to 1 heart. Again, this is because copper isn't as pointy as steel, I guess. And the weight is also much less. Accuracy, about the same. So we know that the accuracy isn't changing based on the core material, nor is it changing based on the bolt material. That's because, you guessed it, the fletching determines the accuracy. So for example, if we swap out the fletching with a slime here, you can see that it still affects the durability overall, because this is, again, a 0.8 modifier. Not affecting the attack, not affecting the weight, but it's affecting our accuracy and our break chance. Okay. So with a wooden core, with a copper tip and feather fletchings, this is what we're going to get. 97.5% accurate, nearing a 10% break chance, and pretty light, only does 1 heart, pretty low ammo. I don't think this is a very good bolt. Personally, I like the iron with steel. That one looks good to me. Sure, we got a high break chance, but I got 100 arrows or nearabouts, and I can repair this. I'm not going to run out in the field. So this is probably a good starting point for bolts. I encourage you again to mess around with your combinations of materials. You can come up with some really cool stuff. Personally, I think these slime leaf fletchings are the bomb here. You can see my accuracy is up to 99%. It does go to 100 if you get the right combination of materials. You can see that my ammo is through the roof here because of the 1.4 times modifier for durability on the slime leaf fletching, which is great. My break chance is about 7%, which is tolerable, considering I have 137 of these bad boys. So let's pull those out of there, and let's go shoot some stuff after I make it dawn. Alright, so to start, you can see my crossbow is not loaded, and it's not trying to load either. You can also see that down in the icon here, the string is flat. It's not drawn back. Once I right-click, there we go. Takes a while to pull back. Again, this is manual in, so we're getting a 4.65, almost a 5-second draw speed, which is pretty slow. But how are we doing on damage? 14.85. Wow. Bang. And again, that is in hearts. So that would one-shot another player without armor. That's pretty sweet. Let's see how it degrades over time. No degradation from 10 to 15. How about at 20? Yeah, a little bit. 25. Yeah, we're losing quite a bit there. Now again, the arrow weight here is 8.55. That's a pretty heavy bolt. It's about as heavy as you're going to get. 5.89. So overall, we're still doing nearly 6 hearts of damage. See that the last dummy so far away, he's not even rendering. There he is. You're still getting close to 6 hearts of damage, even upwards of 30 blocks away. So in my opinion, you can live with that. Your mileage may vary, of course. Alright, so let's get rid of this stuff. We don't need you anymore. Oh, what's this down here in the corner, you might be asking? Well, these are my babies. I was testing earlier and I came up with a pretty sweet crossbow. We're going to check this out before the end of the episode, don't you worry. But I don't want to give that away just yet. So now we're going to talk about modifiers. Modifiers on crossbows are a little weird. They probably don't work exactly like you'd expect them to work. But so let's talk about a few of them. First, we're going to talk about quartz. You know, you want the DPS on your bow, right? You want to crank it up there. Normally what you do is you'd think, I'm going to put some quartz on it, some nether quartz here. Problem. You can do that. You can totally do that. And if you do, you'll get a bow that looks a little bit like this, right here. Sharpness. You can see I've got 216 quartz in this thing. So let's try that out. With the same arrows as before. Huh. I'm actually doing less damage. Now, part of the reason for that is because I'm using a slimy crossbow limb. But you'd think, with 216 quartz in here, that would make up for it, right? Well, here's the deal. Putting Certus quartz on your bow doesn't actually increase the projectile's damage. That's only going to increase the damage if you stand there and swipe at someone with the bow like this. You try to pistol whip them with your crossbow. So that's probably one you can safely avoid on your crossbow unless you're trying to make a weapon that can kind of serve you as a hybrid weapon. You know, maybe you can use it versatily as a melee weapon or as a ranged weapon. Personally, I'd rather just toggle between 2 different weapons and have them specialize, but whatever you'd like to do. So similarly, beheading is the same way. It won't give beheading to your projectiles. It'll just be if you whack someone with the crossbow and kill them, you might behead them. And these all work the same way too. You got Consecrated Soil, which is Smite. You've got Bane of Spiderbane here. You've got Necrotic or Lifesteal, Knockback, and Fiery. All of those will only affect someone that you whack with the crossbow, not the ammunition. So, here are the things that do work on a crossbow. Redstone, that's going to make your draw speed faster. Lapis, that will increase the drop rate of things you kill with the bow. Emerald does what Emerald does. That's a 50% increase on the durability of the bow. Diamonds is a flat 500 increase on the durability of the bow. Obsidian Plate will give it reinforced, and Ball of Moss will give it auto repair. So, personally, I think I'd probably do something like one of my modifiers would probably be full lapis, and then I would channel the rest of it into redstone. Even though I said earlier that getting redstone on your crossbow isn't as important as it is with, say, a longbow, the fact of the matter is there just aren't that many good options for modifiers on crossbows. If I was gonna use something else, I would probably do an auto repair stack. I don't really know. I would probably just stick with redstone and one thing of lapis. But that's me. Alright, so now let's talk about modifiers on bolts. This is where you're really going to crank up your damage. Now, these work kind of as expected. You can just throw a ton of quartz on your bolts and you're going to do a lot more damage. You can throw Some of these don't actually work. I'll show you. I'll demonstrate. If we go over here to the tool forge, let's say we're going to upgrade our bolts. We got 2 modifiers. Well, can I put beheading? Yes, yes I can. All right, cool. How about smite? Yep, that works. Fiery, yep, that'll do. Knockback. Bane of Arthropods. Necrotic. So all those work as you would expect them to work on the arrows. Get rid of those. Cool. So personally with these bolts, what I have found to be effective, and kind of not what you would expect, is the durability increases. Remember that our stack size is a reflection of our overall durability. By increasing our durability, we're increasing our stack size. I will demonstrate. If we were to add a diamond here, you can see we've got 137 max ammo. We used a bit. Boom. This is going to straight up add 50 additional arrows or bolts to the stack. So if you find yourself running out quite a bit, or maybe the materials you used didn't give you a lot of ammo to start with, this will be a good way to bump that up. Similarly, an emerald here will give us, that gave us about 70 because we're already over 100. Again, whenever you have over 100, 50% is going to be a greater increase than flat 50 for obvious reasons. But the fun thing you get into here is with Ball of Moss. Auto repair does work. You will regenerate bolts as you use them, as long as you have access to sunlight. So that's pretty cool. You could put full moss on here and never really need to worry about repairing your bolts unless you are using them just absolutely non-stop. So I thought that was pretty neat and worth mentioning. Alright, get my bolts back. So we've talked about crossbows and how to make them, and how the different materials can impact the stats of the bow. We've talked about the bolts and how to make them, and what the different materials mean for them. So how about we actually put this into action? I've got a fully built crossbow right here that I'm going to demonstrate for you. Now this thing does extreme damage, and I'm going to demonstrate it by summoning in some of these guys. These are iron golems. They are vanilla, but as you can see, they have 100 hit points, which is 50 hearts. So if I were to try and kill this guy with just the manualing crossbow, I don't have any upgrades on it, and these steel bolts that I just made, again, no upgrades on it. Alright, that did about 18 damage. It's about 9 hearts. That's pretty good. Got a slow reload here. Bang. Again, when your bolts connect with an entity, you do not have a chance to retrieve the bolt. Alright, that took what? 5 shots. 5 or 6, I lost count. Alright, well that's respectable. Those guys have a ton of hit points. How many shots do you think it'll take me with my steel crossbow? Tell you what, we'll make 2 of them, just in case I crit one or something. So, I need to load. That's the noise I have to make when I load. Alright, you got 100 hit points. Let's see. Bang! Bang! I'm just shotgunning these mofos. So yeah, you can get crazy damage there. As you can tell, I'm just doing over 100 hit points worth of damage with a single shot on this steel crossbow. So I encourage you to play around with this. It's a great weapon. I personally like them a lot better than regular bows. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments below, or any corrections if you think I messed something up, or grievous omissions that you think I should have mentioned. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on Tinker's Construct crossbows. I'm Jack Draco.